The narrative begins in the year 1964, in an antique shop located on the outskirts of the city. A young couple, Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren, recognized for confronting supernatural phenomena, investigates an enigmatic case involving Lucy, the daughter of the shop owner. Lucy recounts that her father had recently died in a tragic manner. He had been found hanged. Since the mirror arrived at the shop, strange events began to manifest. After her father's death, Lucy decided to store the mirror in the back room, hoping that the disturbances would cease. However, the inexplicable events continued. Driven by curiosity, Ed and Lorraine decide to examine the mirror personally. Upon entering the storage room, Ed shows unease, mainly because Lorraine is in the final months of pregnancy, but she reassures him by saying she will be fine. When her hand touches the frame of the mirror, a sharp pain arises in her abdomen, a sign that labor has begun. Distressed, Ed quickly takes her to a nearby hospital and remains by her side as the couple's first child is born. At the hospital, the doctors ask what happened, and it is evident that the woman is going into labor prematurely. In the delivery room, the tension increases when the lights suddenly go out. Even in pain, Lorraine sees the malignant being pursuing her, present there to torment her at the moment of giving birth. After a prolonged struggle, Lorraine finally gives birth to a girl. However, the joy lasts only briefly. The baby does not make any sound. The doctors do everything they can, but ultimately declare that the child is dead. Overcome with grief, Lorraine holds her lifeless daughter and desperately prays for a chance for her to live. Miraculously, the baby suddenly begins to cry and breathe normally. The girl is named Judy. Time passes quickly. Judy grows up and becomes a kind young woman, inheriting her mother's gift of perceiving spirits. Lorraine teaches her to control this ability, so she will not be constantly disturbed. 22 years later, in 1986, the story turns to the Smurl family in Pennsylvania. Jack and Janet live with their 4 daughters, Heather, Dawn, and the twins Karen and Shannon, as well as Jack's parents. On that day, everyone is busy preparing for Heather's baptism celebration. The house fills with laughter and joy, while Jack records every moment with his portable camcorder. He comments that his daughter is in the recording and mentions that she looks beautiful. At home, hours later, when Heather opens the gift from her grandparents, she is surprised to find an old mirror purchased at an auction. No one realizes that it is the same mirror that brought tragedy to Lucy's family decades earlier. When Heather prepares to blow out the candles at the celebration, they suddenly extinguish themselves. They ask what happened and question who blew out the candle. They all look at each other confused, since no one had blown them out. Seconds later, the ceiling collapses and strikes Heather on the head. The scene shifts to show Ed's family dining at a restaurant. Judy, now an adult, plans a small party to celebrate her parents' retirement from activities in the spiritual world. Ed appears more weakened, as his heart condition has worsened after years of confronting dark forces. The joy of the evening is interrupted when Lorraine feels a sudden chill around her. Judy also falls silent upon sensing that something invisible is approaching. She tries to calm herself by praying, but Lorraine freezes when she sees a shadow of pale hands touching her daughter's shoulder. In an instant, the figure disappears. To avoid worrying Ed, Lorraine and Judy decide to keep the incident secret, avoiding increasing his stress, aware of his fragile health. Meanwhile, in a suburban neighborhood in Pennsylvania, Janet organizes piles of clothes in the basement. Suddenly, she hears a soft voice calling her name. A shadowy silhouette appears in the darkness, but when she turns on the light, no one is there. Later, Janet prepares dinner while speaking on a long-corded telephone. Suddenly, the cable of the device seems to be pulled by something invisible. Irritated, Janet imagines that the children are playing a prank. However, upon seeing them in the living room, she becomes confused. She asks who could have pulled the cord. Meanwhile, the twin daughters happily play with dolls in the bedroom. Shannon notices that one of them has disappeared. She looks around, but in its place finds a terrifying female figure. That night, Heather, unable to endure the unsettling presence of the old mirror any longer, convinces Dawn to help her get rid of it. She feels as though something behind the glass is constantly watching her. She expresses astonishment. The next morning, the mirror is collected by garbage workers and placed in a crushing truck. Moments later, something even more frightening happens. When the mirror shatters into countless pieces, Dawn screams in agony and begins to vomit fragments of glass. Everyone around panics, unable to understand what is happening. After the terrible incident involving Dawn, the narrative shifts to Ed, who undergoes a routine medical examination. The doctor informs him that his heart is more fragile due to years of stress and confrontations with supernatural forces. He is warned that another heart attack could be fatal. Eben understands that his body no longer has the same resistance as before. That night, he returns home and finds Lorraine preparing a small surprise to celebrate his birthday. He feels grateful to still share that moment with the woman he loves. Shortly after, Judy arrives accompanied by her boyfriend Tony. She introduces him to her parents, and Father Gordon, an old family friend, also attends to offer blessings and congratulations. During the warm conversation, Tony steps away for a few moments while Judy goes upstairs to the bedroom filled with childhood memories. While recalling the past, the spirit of Annabelle suddenly appears to torment her once again. Frightened, Judy immediately begins reciting the prayers her mother taught her. Moments later, Tony rushes in after hearing the noise, but Judy, not wanting to worry him, assures him that everything is fine. Then Lorraine calls them to the garage, where Ed is waiting, and teases Tony into a friendly game of ping pong, saying he will need to move around a little. When Judy steps away for a few moments, Tony takes the opportunity to speak privately with her parents. He removes a small ring from his pocket and sincerely declares his intention to marry Judy, hoping for their approval. Amid the awkward yet sincere moment, Lorraine smiles and advises Tony to be a good husband. Shortly after, Judy returns and realizes that Tony intended to propose to her, asking if it was for her, confirming that it was, mentioning the car and agreeing. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in Jack's house becomes increasingly heavy. Still shaken by the strange episode she experienced, Dawn begs her father to move immediately. She feels that the house is no longer safe, and the evident fear on her face shows that she does not want to remain there. However, Jack tries to reassure her. He has already contacted a priest to perform an exorcism in the residence. The clergyman will arrive the following week, and Jack believes everything will be fine. His calm demeanor, however, only increases Dawn's frustration. For her, waiting an entire week is unbearable, especially after everything that has happened in that place. She questions whether they will truly let them live in a haunted house, and states that the entity wants to kill them. Jack replies that it will not happen. That night, while everyone rests, Jack, about to go to bed, is startled when the bedroom door slowly opens by itself. This time, he himself faces a terrifying paranormal manifestation that leaves him paralyzed with fear. At the same time, Heather, unable to sleep, decides to watch an old recording of the family party. When she replays the moment when she was blowing out the candles, something makes her hair stand on end. In the video, a shadowy figure clearly appears beside her, and it is this presence that actually blows out the candle. Suddenly, a tall man appears in the bedroom, advancing toward Heather. She screams in terror, waking the entire house. Janet runs to the room and finds her daughter trembling on the floor, pale with fear. After that frightening night, Janet finally loses her patience. The promised priest will not be able to come before the following week, as he still needs authorization from the church. For Janet, waiting that long means putting the family in danger. Desperate, she decides to seek a local media outlet. She reports the haunting her family is facing, hoping that the publicity will draw the church's attention and make the case a priority. It does not take long for the news of the cursed house to spread quickly. In an interview, Janet states that her family is not seeking notoriety. They simply need urgent help, and what they are experiencing is not an invention. Elsewhere, Judy dedicates herself to preparing for her wedding day. She goes to a boutique with Lorraine to try on her wedding dress. Everything seems normal at first until the stylist Brenda steps away to answer a phone call. As soon as Brenda leaves, Judy feels a cold and strange presence around her. Suddenly, she feels weak as a terrifying spectral figure begins to torment her. A voice asks Brenda if everything is all right down there. At the moment, she begins to regain her calm after the specter disappears. Judy becomes terrified again when her reflection in the mirror suddenly lunges at her. Fortunately, Lorraine, upon hearing the noise, runs inside and finds Judy trembling with fear. Back at Jack's house, Father Gordon finally arrives after the family's case gains media attention. Janet and Jack receive him and recount everything that has happened. In reality, Father Gordon's visit was not officially authorized by the church, which means any measure taken there is outside ecclesiastical jurisdiction. Even so, he wishes to help the family in any way he can. After walking through all the rooms, Gordon senses a deeply malignant presence remaining in the house. A voice mentions spirit and questions what occurred downstairs. Upon perceiving the darkness installed there, he decides to immediately return to the church to request formal permission to perform an exorcism. However, no one imagines that it will be his last day. While awaiting authorization from the high clergy in a silent church office, Gordon begins to experience disturbing supernatural manifestations. A soft voice calls his name. He realizes that the demon haunting Jack's house has followed him to the church. In panic, he tries to react, but the entity is too powerful. The crucifix he holds suddenly bursts into flames. Under the demon's influence, Gordon becomes hypnotized and is led to take his own life. News of his tragic death spreads quickly. Ed and Lorraine, who knew him well, attend the funeral and are deeply shaken. When the ceremony ends and everyone begins to leave, Judy approaches Gordon's coffin. For reasons she cannot explain, she feels compelled to touch it. The moment she does, she has a vision. Upon returning home, Lorraine tries to calm herself by performing routine tasks. While washing dishes in the kitchen, the sink drain suddenly clogs. When she tries to fix it, she feels a strong premonition that something terrible is about to happen to her daughter. At that exact moment, Tony arrives and informs her that Judy is at Jack's house. Without hesitation, Lorraine calls Ed and rushes there. When they arrive in the neighborhood, they are stunned to see a large crowd of onlookers and reporters gathered in front of Jack's residence. Worried, Lorraine and Ed quickly enter, fearing that something has happened to Judy. To their relief, Judy is safe. She went there on purpose to investigate Father Gordon's death after receiving a vision during the funeral. Judy believes his death was not an accident, but the consequence of an attack by the malignant entity haunting the house. She begs her parents to help the Smurl family, convinced that only Ed and Lorraine possess the strength necessary to confront such a powerful presence. Although Ed initially hesitates due to his fragile condition, they ultimately agree to help. Before beginning the exorcism, Ed asks Jack and Janet to explain how the haunting began. As they tell the story, the atmosphere in the room transforms. The air becomes heavy and cold. Lorraine perceives a shadowy presence invisible to the others. In that tense moment, Judy apologizes to her mother for having acted alone and caused worry. Before Lorraine can respond, a noise echoes from upstairs. Sensing danger, Lorraine asks Judy to remain downstairs while she investigates. Upstairs, she perceives a shadowy figure swiftly crossing the corridor. Lorraine then reveals to Ed that the house once belonged to farmland owned by a man who murdered his wife with an axe after catching her in betrayal. He also killed his in-laws before taking his own life. Even so, Lorraine explains that something far more sinister is at work, an entity so powerful that it now controls the spirits of those victims, using them to terrorize Jack's family. Meanwhile, inside the house, Judy hears what seems to be her mother's voice calling her from upstairs. Unaware that it is a trick of the malignant entity attempting to lure her, she follows the sound. Upon reaching the attic, Judy is shocked to find the old mirror, previously destroyed, now perfectly intact. A dark and intense energy emanates from it. Amid fear, she hears the voice of a child calling her name. Frightened, she goes downstairs. But upon entering the children's bedroom, she encounters something terrifying. Before her stands a large and horrifying version of Annabelle, who in a macabre manner begins to chase her. Hearing Judy's screams, Ed and Lorraine rush upstairs and find her lying on the floor, trembling with fear. Judy reports that she saw the old mirror in the attic. When Ed and Lorraine go up, they are stunned to see the cursed mirror inside the Smurl family home. In shock, they explain everything to Jack and Janet. Ed declares that all the paranormal events tormenting the house originate from that mirror, an object that carries immense malignant power. They had faced that same mirror 22 years earlier. However, after the shop went bankrupt and all the artifacts were auctioned, the object passed through several owners. After the explanation, Ed and Lorraine decide to take it to the special containment room, ensuring that it will never harm anyone again. However, at the moment they prepare to lift it, the mirror suddenly topples, nearly making another victim. Amid the confusion, Lorraine realizes that Judy has disappeared. Upon finding her, she is horrified to see her daughter possessed. Judy remains motionless for a moment. The same dark spirit that had attacked her since before birth has returned, now stronger than ever. Under possession, Judy knocks Lorraine unconscious and locks her in the basement. Then the malignant entity disturbs the rest of the family, causing even more fear among them. Ed, witnessing the terrifying scene, desperately tries to save his daughter, but the effort triggers a heart attack. Meanwhile, Lorraine regains consciousness and struggles to get out of the basement, only to be blocked by a large man wielding an axe, the vengeful spirit of the murderer who once lived there. Just as he prepares to strike, Tony appears and saves Lorraine in time. Upstairs, Ed miraculously survives the heart attack. He immediately orders Jack to remove the family from the house, now enveloped in dark energy. Shortly afterward, Lorraine and Tony rush to help Ed rescue Judy, only to find her hanging by a rope. Horrified, they quickly cut the rope and ask to lift her up. Judy is not breathing, and panic dominates the environment as they perform chest compressions and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Relief comes when Judy finally gasps and opens her eyes. However, the respite is short-lived. The cursed mirror begins to spin violently, indicating that the entity inside it remains alive and increasingly stronger. The released force hurls Tony across the room, trapping him beneath the object. Determined to save him, Ed begins the exorcism prayer, but he cannot finish it. The attacks intensify. At that critical moment, Lorraine understands that the only way to defeat the evil is to confront it directly. Gathering courage, Ed, Lorraine, and Judy touch the mirror together and pray aloud. An explosion of intense light floods the room, and the dark energy contained in the mirror is finally destroyed. Ed, Lorraine, Judy, Tony, and the Smurl family survive. The Smurls continue living in the house for more than 3 years, although the trauma never completely disappears. The cursed mirror is stored in Ed and Lorraine's museum, locked away to prevent it from causing harm again. Judy and Tony eventually marry and build a happy life, while Lorraine has a vision of a peaceful future surrounded by grandchildren. In the final moments, Ed and Lorraine record their experiences in a book and share their knowledge about the supernatural at a university, hoping that future generations will continue the mission. They continue helping other people, although now only by telephone. The final note reveals that Ed and Lorraine remained married for more than 6 decades. At 74 years old, Ed suffered a severe stroke, and Lorraine cared for him until his death 5 years later. She never remarried and passed away of natural causes at 92 years old. This is the end of their journey.